Okay, so you finally got the financial foundation. You've calculated your manpower and you know your efficiency. How does all of that roll up into the understanding of the true cost of drilling?
Yeah, so once you have all those numbers and you've put that legwork in and you've looked at your manpower and you looked at efficiency, now you're able to look at what's the true cost of drilling. And that's on a cost drilling template that we can provide that we're going to show you later on down the road.
Can you give me an example?
Yeah, so here's an example of where this cost summary template would have been very beneficial. Recently, I was talking to a client and we were just talking business and what the market conditions were like in their area. And they told me that they were charging $2,800 a day for a crew. That's a two-person crew, a driller and driller assistant, drill rig, a truck, a trailer, and a support vehicle. $2,800 a day. We ran some back of the napkin math and realized that it was actually costing them $3,500 a day to go out there and perform the work, right? So it's staggering. On a one job basis, that's a $700 loss for that day, right? Let's just boil it down to that, a $700 loss. For a 1 day job, not the end of the world. But if we're going out day after day after day and we're charging $2,800, but it actually is costing us $3,500, right? That's hundreds of thousands of dollars lost every single year that we just didn't even know about. The cash was hitting our bank, it was coming in, cash was coming in, we thought we were doing good, we were able to pay some bills, but at the end, it's always gonna catch up to you, right? So we simply sat down and with this in particular, this client in particular, and we looked at the numbers and we said, wait a second, we need to do something different here, right? We can't sustain a business like this. It's not sustainable.
Right, and that's kind of brutal, but it's eye-opening.
It is eye-opening. It is eye-opening. And here's where the challenge lies, right? This template is going to provide you all the information to look at things wide open, right? You're going to have a full picture of what it truly costs to operate your business. And there's a couple options, right? The easy button that you can hit is to just say, oh, I'm just going to raise prices.
Sure.
That's it. It's that simple. This is how much it costs me per day, and I'm just going to raise prices. It's not a viable solution. You're going to be pretty disappointed with what happens down the line because you're going to upset clients. You know, who knows what's going to happen, right? But that's not the only solution. I'm not saying that maybe there's some adjustments that can or cannot be made, but you have to look at it through both lenses. One in the lens of billing and how much you can bill your client per day. But the other one is you have to take some ownership of the operations of your company, right? And you have to look at manpower. You have to look at overhead. You have to look at excess spending on repairs and maintenance for your equipment. You have to look at how much it's costing you in fuel. Do you need to revise the trips and who goes where and when to save money on fuel, right? You have to take some ownership of this as well because hitting that easy button, it might be a viable solution in the short run, but it is not going to pan out in the long run for you. Understanding your true cost of drilling, having it broken down line by line like we go through, and having that financial framework set up to spot trends down the road. You can't spot trends right away. It takes time and consistency to be able to spot trends. But having that information 3 months down the road is going to help you. 6 months down the road is going to help even more and give you more information, right? It's very important to look at this and take the information and make educated decisions using the numbers based off it. So looking at the cost summary template on your screen, you can see here that there's several cells that are highlighted in gray. Once again, like many of our templates, once again, you can find our templates at rigsource.com under the resources tab. But many of our templates, they auto-populate. They pull through other sections. So the first category is your direct labor benefits, and your direct labor payroll taxes. Those pull through our manpower document. The sections highlighted in gray are areas that you need to look at. And these are areas that you need to speculate and you need to, put a reasonable estimate on how much it's going to cost you per year for each line item. If your financial framework was set up, you can go back and look at a historical trend to see how much you're averaging and spend for each one of these categories, right? But each one of these categories needs to be considered. These are suggestions. These might not apply to everybody's business. Some might, some won't. Maybe there's some that need to be added into your direct cost. Feel free to just add in a row. Just always make sure you double check the formula that it's pulling through to your total cost of drilling operations after you add those rows. So once all those get populated, now you come to the total cost of drilling operations, right? And this is where you take a look at it and say, okay, now I know how much my total cost of drilling operations is. How does this correlate with the productive hours that we've looked at on the efficiency template? And this is where it becomes eye-opening. And the next step that we talk about is how these numbers are used when we generate a quote for a customer. So there's 4 sections that we talk about here, right? When you look at your total productive labor hours, right? When you look at that and you divide that by your total cost of drilling operations, that number that it produces is your total cost per productive hour. That's a very important piece because that means every single time you send out a direct labor employee, a revenue producing employee, that is the true cost that it takes for them to work 1 hour. It could be eye-opening. Once again, we're referring to $20 and $30 an hour employees, and the number you see on your screen is over $100 an hour. And that's reality. When you take into consideration the indirect salaries and wages, the cost to maintain drill rigs, all the consumables and fuel and per diem expenses, it all adds up. If we don't take all these into consideration, we are going to miss the mark on profitability completely. The next section is your overhead per hour. This takes all of the overhead items listed in this template, and there's a formula in there for you, so it does the legwork for you on this, and it divides it by the productive labor hour. The next section that we look at is your direct labor plus benefits per hour, and this is basically your labor break-even point. So let's say you want to take on a job for a friend, maybe you owe him a favor, you want to cut him a break. At a minimum, you want to make sure you cover your labor and your benefits. You would use this rate for your quoting. You're not gonna, hit them with the full rate because maybe you owe them a favor. You just want to do something kind. That's the rate that you would want to look at. And the final section is what we're going to call your mob and demob rate. So when you have a crew in a truck and they're just driving from site to site, it's not realistic to think that we can charge a client, or borderline ethical to charge a client for the full cost per hour for each employee, right? But what we should look at is direct labor, their benefits, vehicle maintenance, repairs and maintenance, and depreciation on that equipment, right? Because that's the equipment that's taking the wear and tear to mob and demob from site to site. And of course, we still have to pay the employees while they're driving from site to site. So we broke that out separately so that our quote is more reflective of actual cost that it's costing us, right? It's a more accurate reflection, let's say, of what it's actually costing us that we need to recoup when we consider building a quote for a client.